A lady with luscious pink hair lays in bed asleep. As the soft rays of sunlight shines on her face, she mutters under her breath about it feeling so comfortable. Her hands wandered, and as she felt the firm muscles under her palm she exhaled in satisfaction, commenting that she liked men with big chests. And that's when it finally hit her: she was laying on a man's chest. She opened her eyes to get a good look at the man and found a man with blonde hair and a perfect face, one she didn't recognize. Which naturally begged the question, who then was this damn beautiful man? Going back to the previous night, she recalls how she was at the masquerade ball at the Imperial Palace celebrating her birthday. Then she met a beautiful man. A man with divine appearance. In the present day she wonders aloud what she'd done. In her mind she pleaded with her father to forgive her. After all, that wasn't a normal thing to do as soon as one came of age. She calmed down and took another glance at the man laying in bed next to her. She couldn't help but drool at the beautiful sight in front of her. Every time she looked at him, it felt like she was looking at a beautiful art. His fingers move slightly and the next minute his eyes snap open. He flashed her a gentle smile, stilling her in place. Then he got up and placed a gentle kiss on her forehead, kissing her good morning. Her cheeks were flushed as she forced a simple hello in response. He asks if she's okay and she responds with a firm yes. Unexpectedly, he lowered his gaze and offered an apology. He explained to her that it was his first time so he couldn't control himself, while she just turned her head away in embarrassment, wondering what he was talking about. In her head she shamelessly pondered, he says it's his first time doing something like this, so then how can he be so skilled and energetic? He asks if he should call a doctor, and again, she refuses. Finally he asks if she's hungry, and this time she explains that she doesn't usually eat in others' houses so she'll return home. However, he suddenly grabs a bell and rings it, insisting she has a proper meal before taking her leave. She shot up from the bed, considering how her father and brothers will be worried if she didn't leave soon, but then her movements suddenly stopped. She turned back to the man and asked if he could turn around for a moment, but to her surprise, instead he grabbed a portion of her hair in his hand and asked if she was still shy after everything she's done. He continued, placing a gentle kiss on her hair. He reveals he'll like her to call him by his name. The previous night, before they'd gone all the way, she stopped him and asked for his name. He was silent at first, but then he revealed it: Theodore. Her cheeks burnt with heat in the present day as she softly mutters his name. He asked if she still remembered and she said yes, but she had something else to tell him. However, just as she was about to speak about the previous night, an attendant suddenly knocked at the door, and before she could process anything, she felt Theodore's firm hands reaching for her and pulling her towards him. Her body pressed firmly against his as he demanded to know who was there. The attendant spoke immediately. "Did you call for me, Your Excellency?" Something shot through her and her eyes snapped open as she wondered why the attendant had referred to him that way. Then for confirmation, she gently called, "Your Highness?" He responded with a smile while she forced a smile in return. On the outside she managed to remain calm and composed, however, on the inside she was a mess, babbling about how she'd made a mistake, and the reason for that reaction was simple. That man was a tyrant and she'd reincarnated into the novel she read before she died. In her past life, she was a simple college student, obsessed with a fantasy romance novel, For My Emperor. The heroine who becomes an imperial knight and goes through so many hardships. She suggested many things until they met, and in the end they got married. She had a random excitement attack in bed that caused her to kick off the blanket as she wondered what would happen to the other woman then, Judith, the supporting character. Judith Ferger Green, unlike the protagonist who made her own way, Judith was born into an aristocratic family, a woman not loved by her family. In the end she dies miserably after harassing the protagonist out of jealousy. Just like Judith, she wasn't loved by her family either, and she didn't like her ending. But for some reason, she became that woman. Noticing the maid standing in front of her, her eyes welled up instantly before letting out a loud wail. She worked in college for about 3 years and was finally about to graduate. She couldn't believe she died a week ago in a car accident. She would have preferred to be a main character if she was going to reincarnate. She didn't want to die a painful death just like Judith in the novel and was pleased to be sent back to Korea. Judith, she, who was destined to die in the hands of the tyrant. Theodore Grain Lou Valdemar, he is the current emperor of the Valdemar Empire, which has the largest territory in the continent. He was the sole heir to the empire's throne. But when the previous emperor's mistress gave birth to a son, his situation worsened day by day and his mother ended up committing. At the age of 19 his father passed away and he ended up succeeding the throne. Shortly after, the second prince died in a fire accident. A bloodless, restless tyrant who killed his younger brother and father for the throne, and he was the protagonist of the novel she reincarnated in. For Judith, the emperor was no different from her enemy. He even went as far as to kill his fiancée, Judith, for interfering in his romantic relationship with the female protagonist. Suddenly an idea came to mind: if I get to know the emperor way before that, he shouldn't kill me, right? If things went well, wouldn't I love happily ever after? So she resolved to use her abilities and otherworldly cuteness. Unlike the sad past life of Judith, her family was kind to her. She'd conquered her family and all that was finally left was the emperor. She knew she must meet him, and for that reason, she decided to attend the New Year's party and all the banquets held at the imperial palace because, most importantly, she wanted to be in a relationship. The masquerade party was a banquet held for nobles who had just become adults. It was an important event the emperor would attend to give a speech every year and leave afterwards. In other words, one could confidently look for a lover. Without hesitation she waved down an attendant and asked him to bring her the strongest drink. He was stunned at first, but he ended up giving in, and in the end she sat with 3 empty glasses wondering why there were no handsome men. She had to head back home with disappointment to calm her elder brothers who were upset, but just like fate, in that final moment she spotted a man in the corner. A man with perfect looks, her husband. She went after him, even losing her mask in the process, but it didn't matter. He made a sharp turn and she followed without hesitation, until they ended up alone in a room together. He finally spoke, wondering what he should call her behavior. Was she being brave or just purely naive? He turned his head, his tone sharp as he asked if she hadn't learnt not to follow strangers carelessly. She pouted her lips, her eyes unwavering as she brazenly declared that he'd seduced her. A subtle smile appears on his lips. He rips off the mask from his face and closes the distance between them, trapping her against the wall. Then his voice drops low. Then, is that supposed to be my fault? Enraged, she grabbed his shirt and pulled him down, pressing her lips hard against his. He didn't push her away, rather he continued, stepping forward until he successfully led her onto the bed. He stopped and buried his head in her shoulder for a while, his expression gloomy. He pulled back and no, he didn't want it that way. She moved forward, her voice barely steady as she asked what was wrong, reminding him she was an adult too. Forcing a smile, he told her she'll regret it. A smile reappeared on her face, and before he could even process it she leaned forward and kissed him, noting she wouldn't. She was so excited the previous night, but now, suddenly she felt so sad. She went on her knees and admitted herself that she'd committed an indescribable act towards him and begged him to spare her life, promising never to cross paths with him again. He went stiff for a while before suddenly asking if she was leaving. Then, without giving her a chance to respond, he demanded to know how she dares take the emperor's virginity and flee, asking if she really thought it'll be that easy. She heard him call her name softly and saw him raise his hand to comfort her. However, she misunderstood and instead trembled with tears clinging to her eyelids as she tried to convince herself it was okay. Since dying in his hands was bound to happen, it didn't matter whether it happened now or later. However, contrary to that thought, he instead placed a kiss on her forehead before telling her she had to take the responsibility of taking his virginity. His gaze remained fixed on her until she finally gave in, accepting to take responsibility. So, what should I do, Your Majesty? The scene transitions to her shoving different foods into her mouth. The emperor, watching her with utter devotion, asks if the food is good and she says yes. For a moment, she felt herself captivated by his kindness. However, she quickly stopped and reminded herself he was a tyrant who only cared about the original female lead, Cern. But more than that, his next words sent a joke through her body. So, when is a perfect date for the wedding? He gently patted her back asking if she was okay before suddenly asking if someone was outside. An attendant came in and he asked him who'd made the early morning menu and he responded saying it was the head chef. Almost immediately he snapped demanding to know if they wished to choke her to death by giving her bread, someone who was already hungover from the previous night. Without he ordered for the head chef to be thrown in the dungeon. Judith tried to defuse the situation and explained that she was the one who'd swallowed it wrong, but he just placed a hand on hers as he assured her it wasn't her fault. Rather, it was just that she couldn't eat the bread. She stared at him in return, stunned by his lovesick act. She never imagined she'd meet anyone like her father and brothers who'd blame a wooden board being left on the garden path if she tripped and then try to fire or cut off their hands for that mistake. She quickly diffused the situation by deliberately hugging her father and brothers to calm them down. Now, she wondered if she should use the same tactics to interfere. Her lips parted open slightly as she called out to the emperor. Then with a gloomy look she confessed that she'll be sad if he fired the chef since the bread was so nice. Without wasting any time he turned to his attendant and asked that he bestow upon the chef a reward and asked the chef to pay more attention to the menu in the future and also give him a reward. His attendant left, leaving both of her with the emperor wondering if she'd done the right thing. She turned to look at the emperor after, the ruthless tyrant now staring at her with an innocent expression, and instinctively buried her head in her palm to hide her burning cheeks as she thought, "You tyrant, you can't just smile at me like that after trying to ruin someone's life." He spoke again asking if they should resume their previous conversation about their marriage. She lets out a soft chuckle to ease the awkward tension, but he only looks at her with genuine confusion, asking whether that was not what taking responsibility meant. She clutched her dress, wondering how she could refuse. Since, in the original novel, Judith also had a convenience marriage with Theodore, so if they followed the same path, that would mean the probability of her dying increases, but at the same time she was also afraid of rejecting him. Her thoughts immediately shifted to her father and brothers. She didn't want them to get in danger because of her stupid mistake. At that moment, the emperor's aide calls out to him. He shoots the man a hostile look, demanding to know what he wants, before striding over. The aide leans in and whispers something into his ear. Whatever he hears makes him turn back to Judith with a faint sigh, apologizing that it seems he must step away for a while. He presses a brief kiss to her forehead before taking his leave. The emperor sat in the palace hall with clear disinterest, as though the entire matter bored him. Even his assistant noticed the tension, a bead of sweat forming on his cheek as he observed the emperor's cold expression. Without adjusting his relaxed posture, the emperor asked the man before him why he was there, addressing him as Lord Furger. The duke immediately apologized and requested permission to deploy his soldiers to search the palace. When the emperor asked for an explanation, the duke revealed that his daughter had gone missing. She had not been seen since the previous night's banquet. They had searched the entire capital, yet there was still no trace of her. After a brief pause, the emperor granted his authorization and the duke thanked him repeatedly for his generosity. Leaning back in his chair, the emperor calmly reminded him that searching the palace was a significant overstep, and that such permission was only possible because of His Majesty's generosity. The duke quickly agreed, expressed his gratitude once more, and took his leave. Once the doors closed behind him, the emperor rested his hand against his jaw and hummed softly in satisfaction. Suddenly, an attendant rushed into the hall in visible panic, reporting that the young lady who had been in the emperor's chambers had disappeared. At the same time, Judith hid behind a pillar considering her plan one more time. The first step she took was leaving a note as an excuse to prevent the emperor's anger. Secondly, she'll move slowly and leave without anyone seeing her. For the third step, she'll ask the servant Marie to disguise as her and leave for another country. For the fourth, the emperor will come to look for Judith, and once he sees Marie he'll give up because he wouldn't be able to find her. For the final step, if the emperor falls in love with Cern as in the original story, the problem will be solved and everything will be fine. And she would enjoy her family's love in their duchy. The plan was perfect. However, her excitement vanished instantly, replaced by dread as she realized her entry identification was gone. At that very moment, a voice spoke up in the hall, reporting to His Majesty that the identification in their possession belonged to Princess Ferger. However, that wasn't all she'd left behind. They found a note next to the bed while they found the ID in the hallway of the banquet hall. At the same time, images of her flashed through his mind, and he instinctively muttered that she was cute. His attendant remained silent, tense, not daring to speak, but he could feel the thought echoing in his master's mind, "I started loving her already?" The attendant immediately dropped to his knees asking for his punishment, but the emperor must have waved it off. He strode outside the hall unbothered, leaving the attendant on his knees repeating endless apologies. Meanwhile, Judith still stood behind a pillar, wondering what she could possibly say to the guards without her ID to get out. Her mind drifted to the emperor. If he found out she was Princess Ferger, her life would be over instantly. However, just as she stood trying to see if there was some kind of way to get the guards' attention, she heard a certain familiar voice and immediately called out to her brother. She bolted, trying to get to him only to be stopped harshly by a guard who insisted they needed to verify her identity. Her brother interfered in time, vouching for her identity and ordering that the knight withdraw his horrible weapon. The knight apologized and she rushed to her brother immediately, relieved that she could get home quickly. Her brother suddenly cupped her face, demanding to know where she was, if she'd gotten hurt or perhaps was scared, but instead she offered an apology before explaining that she drank so much and ended up falling asleep. He asked again if she was sure nothing had happened, and she responded this time around with even more certainty. After confirming everything was fine, he disclosed that he was going to call their father, and asked her to head to the carriage first. She seemed confused, so he explained that the Duke was so worried he approached the Emperor and asked for his permission to search the entire palace for her. Realizing the danger of that situation, she collapsed into her brother's arms, putting on the perfect act. Tears clung to her lashes as she complained that she'd felt so bad from drinking and asked if they could head home first. Without hesitation, he turned to his guard and ordered him to wait there for his father while he returned with Judith. Later at the Ferger mansion, the butler hurried inside to announce her return. The moment her brother saw her, he rushed over and bombarded her with questions, barely giving her a chance to answer. He asked why she didn't come with him, why they had to bring her there, if she was hurt, where she'd been, and if she didn't just want to tell him. However, she noticed the blood on his clothes and asked about it. Forcing a laugh, he assured her it was nothing and that he'd definitely not killed anyone. Just as they are reconnecting, someone suddenly shouts her name in a loud voice, interrupting them. She turned around and saw her father gripping the broken door handle he had just ruined, demanding to know if she had any idea how worried he had been. She tightened her grip on her clothes, afraid she would be punished, and muttered an apology, but instead of scolding her, her father simply held her close as he assured her that everything was all right now that she was back with him, and gently asked if she was okay, but her brother quickly added that she had said she was not feeling well. Almost immediately, their father ordered that a doctor be brought to her side. Later, after examining her, the doctor informed them that she happened to be sick from drinking too much. The three men as usual were sent straight into panic. Her father questioned if there was a way to heal that, her younger brother wondered what he should do, and her older brother offered his hand for her to throw up in. That house was really a mess whenever she took her eyes off it for even a second. She got up and assured her father and brothers she was okay, asking them to return to their several important positions. She switched to a bright smile as she revealed, she felt so much better just after seeing her father and brothers. They took their leave, and that evening, she opened a window, ready to jump down when a worried voice suddenly called out from behind her asking if they really had to do all that. Her maid complained that being a noble lady was all too much for her, but she just assured her it was the way everyone lived and gave her a letter to show the Duke if he happened to be displeased about the arrangement. Just like that, she slipped out through the servant quarters and made her way to the garden. Finding the hole she knew all too well, she crawled through it and finally stepped outside. Relief washed over her, as all that remained was to locate the port. But that thought vanished the moment a familiar voice called her name. She looked up to find the emperor standing before her, his hands stretched out as he revealed he had come to pick her up. The scene shifted to the palace hall, where the servants all bowed and greeted them respectfully. She walked forward with a strained expression, thinking that in the end, she had returned to the dragon's lair. As they walked, her eyes quickly landed on a fine painting, and when she asked about it, the emperor didn't waste any time and explained quickly. He told her it was said that the first emperor was a half-man half-dragon, and the symbol of the imperial house was a dragon because of its power. He added that even now from time to time, a member of the imperial family inherits the power of the dragon. According to the description in the original book, the dragon powers that Theo inherited were: the first was a strong body, as strong as the dragon's scales. The next was extraordinary strength, like that of her father or brother Cain. Finally, the third was Reikion, a sword with an ego, belonging to the first emperor. He asked if they shall head upstairs, and she agreed. As they walked, she considered everything. With so much power, even with the stigma of having killed his family, he would be considered an emperor. Furthermore, he will soon meet the female protagonist Cern and will have the love of his life. She will finally have freedom and will live the happy life of a supporting actor. Suddenly she snapped, demanding to know what the emperor was doing. She turned her head away, her voice remaining the same pitch as she told him she wasn't ready to spend the night with him just yet, but to her surprise he cut her off, saying she'll need clothes to change into. Holding his pajamas towards her, he explained that he only had his pajamas, but he'll call a customer designer first thing the morning of the next day, begging her to be patient with that one. She pressed her eyes shut, unable to face him, but still she thanked him for his consideration. As she changed, he turned his head away, placing a hand over his mouth, trying to conceal the heat rising to his cheeks. When she finally finished and stood before him, he could only apologize, leaving her confused. He explained that he had pushed her away because he feared he would lose control, and that he should have been more careful the previous day. Hearing that, she felt a quiet sympathy for him and, with shy honesty, admitted that she had actually enjoyed yesterday and thought it was great. Before the atmosphere could settle, the emperor suddenly lowered his head. He stepped closer and pulled her gently toward him, his breath grazing her ear as he murmured softly, asking whether they could do it again. "Judith, can we?" Noticing her silence, he suddenly switched and suggested they go to bed since it was already late. In bed, he kissed her good night on her forehead before going to sleep. The next morning she laid on his chest, smiling in satisfaction. The emperor, noticing this, took the chance to tease her and asked if she liked his chest that much. She sprang up the next minute, apologizing over and over, even though he'd assured her it was okay. Then, he suddenly picked her up and carried her in his arms to the dining table, noting she had to eat something. He watched her shove food into her mouth with satisfaction before dropping the bomb. "Let's talk about what we were talking about yesterday, our marriage. When would it be good?" "How about the day after tomorrow?" She chewed in frustration, trying to think of an excuse to stop the marriage no matter what. Something came to mind and she finally spoke. She confessed that she'd actually dared to tell a lie to him. She decided to come clean and clarified that she wasn't actually Lady Judith but a servant to the Duke of Ferger. She didn't stop there and cooked up a deeper explanation. She shared her desire to visit the palace at least once, and since her ladyship was so generous, she sent her to the masked ball to do it for her, but as a commoner she couldn't get married to the emperor. She told him she was sure the nobles will object too, but he simply assured her that it was okay because she was the one he wanted to marry, and naturally, he'll make sure no one would object. Realizing her plan had failed, she returned to the original storyline. It was currently May, and according to the plot, the emperor would meet the original female lead at the September Harvest Festival. Until then, she needed to find another way to delay the marriage. Then an idea suddenly came to her. Cherry blossoms. She lifted her gaze and said that she wanted to get married on a day when cherry blossoms fell like snow. She could see the disappointment flicker across his face, but that reaction was expected since cherry blossoms wouldn't bloom again until March of the following year. Just as she began to wonder whether she had been unreasonable, the emperor quietly agreed. He said it was fine, they would hold the wedding on a day when cherry blossoms filled the sky. At the same time, back at the Furger Duchy, her father's stern voice echoed through the manor as he demanded to know whether she was truly gone. Marie stood there trembling, clutching the letter in her hands as she explained that her lady had told her to give him the letter, assuring her that he would understand once he read it. Without wasting a second, they took the letter and opened it, immediately beginning to read its contents. My dear parents and brothers, by the time you read this letter, I will be gone. Yesterday at the masked ball, I made a mistake with the emperor. I will hide for a while fearing that the flames would reach my father and brothers. If His Majesty looks for me, have Marie go in my place. He'd probably give up if he knew I was the person he was looking for. Sorry for the worry, don't worry too much, stay safe until we meet again. Her father's hand trembled as he muttered that the emperor must have scared her so much that she ran away. He ordered her brothers to take the knights and search the capital, and when they asked what he would do, he revealed he would be going to the imperial palace. At the same time in the imperial palace, she walks around with the emperor. She looks ahead and quickly catches a portrait of a boy, with dazzling hair and purple eyes, still young. She turned to the emperor and asked if that was what he looked like when he was younger. He asks if she's really noticed that, and she says yes, adding that they looked completely alike. But just as she smiles in satisfaction, the emperor's voice suddenly comes asking, "What else?" She raises a hand to her mouth, feigning the usual love-struck act as she asks if he was very handsome when he was young, wondering what he expected her to say, and he confirms that he was. She noticed something was off and asked if perhaps she'd said something wrong, and he said no. She asks why he wants to marry her, and he responds saying it's because he spent his first night with her. She asks what would have happened if he'd spent it with someone else, but he just affirms with certainty that that wouldn't have happened. However, only her knew he'll change his mind once he met Cern. Flashing a warm smile, she insists he might regret it, marrying someone he spent only one night with. After all, he might find someone better than her, but he just calls her by name and notes that there isn't anyone better than her. Even if there was, he wouldn't want her, he only desired her, Judith. He assured her it was okay if she didn't remember, but asked her to keep one thing in her mind: he had no intention of letting her go. Suddenly, a guard's voice rang out, insisting that someone was not permitted to enter. The voices coming from outside sounded strangely familiar to her, stirring a faint sense of recognition. However, before she could fully process it, the emperor pulled her firmly against his chest, holding her as if to shield her. And moments later, the duke appeared through the door, meeting his daughter in the emperor's arms with a smirk on his face. In the end, they all sat through a meal together. The emperor encouraged them to eat as much as they liked, but her father wasted no time and cut straight to the point. He demanded to know exactly what Judith had done, insisting he would take responsibility as her father. The emperor did not hold back. He began to explain that she had committed a very serious offense, but just as he was about to reveal the details of that night, Judith interrupted. Her brother's face shifted to panic, and they quickly asked if she was all right. The emperor immediately ordered a doctor to be brought, but she called out from behind him, insisting she was fine. She pressed her eyes shut, letting out a quiet sigh as the truth settled in. There was no way to avoid the situation any longer. Finally, she confessed to her father about what had happened at the masked ball. Her brothers were stunned into silence. Then her father's voice came, trembling with disbelief and anger. With who? What have you done? She clenched her fists and muttered an apology. It was her first time, so she had not cared much at the moment, but now the weight of her family's disappointment pressed down on her. Her father slammed his palm onto the table, his voice booming through the room. How dare you commit such an act with my daughter, Your Majesty? She froze, completely stunned by her father's words. Trying to stop things from getting worse, she finally spoke, admitting she had been the one to approach the emperor first, but her brothers weren't having it. Anger flashed in their eyes as they demanded whether the emperor had forced her to say it. Another brother's voice was sharp, bitter. He called it a shame that the man he had sworn loyalty to for years had ended up a vile thief. Her father's voice cut through next, echoing in the hall as he demanded how their little angel could even think of seducing a man like him. The emperor didn't flinch. He looked straight at them and stated, calmly but firmly, that Judith had taken his virginity, and also agreed to take responsibility for him. In response, her father then asked if he really wished to get married because of what happened that night. The emperor placed a hand on his jaw, his expression glowing with calm confidence as he noted that he was a man who valued purity greatly, and he would also give up everything he has for the woman he loves. Judith pressed her lips together, quietly sipping her tea, watching her father fall behind on the negotiation. Then the emperor leaned forward, asking, almost casually, when would be a good date for the wedding? I don't mind if it's tomorrow. Judith spun toward her father, her voice trembling. No. Her father's eyes softened as he looked at her tear-filled gaze. He turned to the emperor and noted that it was common during that time for two unmarried people to spend the night together before their wedding. Then he placed a firm hand on her shoulder and guided her toward the door, murmuring that she must be tired and they should go home. But then the emperor's voice stopped them again. This time he spoke even more confidently than before. Lord Ferger, do you remember the promise you made to me this morning? You promised to compensate me instead of allowing the search. So I want you to accept me as your son-in-law. What do you think? Her brothers were stunned. They clearly had not expected that, and neither had their father. But they quickly recovered and, together, demanded to know whether the emperor had lost his mind. Judith observed everything in silence. She realized that if her father and brothers continued protesting for her sake, they would be branded as traitors. She suddenly shouted for everyone to stop. Her father looked at her with fondness, quietly thinking about how lovely she was. She was already yelling at her brother and father looked while scolding them. Just like an adult, she was now a little adult. At the same time, the emperor watched her with a faint, amused smile, noticing how she clenched her fists and gathered all her strength just to raise her voice that much. She openly made a suggestion, because they still didn't know each other well. First, she'll go to the imperial palace to see the emperor every day. After that, if he still doesn't change his mind, then they'll talk about marriage again. Her father told her he was against that, but she just insisted she'll take responsibility for her brazen actions. She suggested they head home, but just as she turned to leave with her brothers and father, the emperor's voice stopped her. She turned around and found him sulking like a child, but she strengthened her resolve, refusing fall for that face, and told him they'll see each other the next day. Later at the duchy, she stared at her reflection hard in the mirror, wondering if she'd done a good job. She yelled that hard, but in reality, she was actually scared of meeting the emperor the next day. Doesn't this mean I'll die before the original story even begins? In the original story, the reason Judith met her end so early was because she interfered with the relationship between the emperor and CERN, so, unlike the past Judith, she wondered if she rooted for them instead. Then, she should be safe, right? She got another idea. Wouldn't it be nice for him to think that they will go out first and then break up? She smiled in satisfaction, but that didn't last because she soon realized something strange. Theo has become much softer than in the original novel, so then why did he become so weak? She heard a knock on her door and turned around to find her brothers. Her younger brother mentioned that it had been a while since their special magic training and asked how she felt, and she told him she was great. It had now become public knowledge that amongst the ancestors of the Ferger family, there were demons. So descendants like her father and brother Cain were born with powers greater than humans. In fact, the body that Judith possessed also inherited the power of another demon. She failed her practice once again, and they resorted to taking a break. She finally accepted it, that she had no talent for magic, and suggested they stop training. Instead, her brother asked her to pay attention as he proceeded to give her a life lesson. He noted that there were only two types of men in that world, only trash and dog men's. He continued and explained that she never knows what kind of trash she would encounter in life, so there was nothing wrong with learning self-defense magic. He also added that she had the heart of an angel and brought up the emperor agreeing to meet with her every day. She asked what kind of men they were, and they responded saying they were good trash, and insisted his younger sister could only know good trash. They were able to lighten her mood, and strangely she felt a bit relieved after the training. Only as she was returning to her room, she didn't expect to meet her father on the way. They ended up standing together on the balcony, sharing an unexpected conversation. He asked her whether she truly intended to go to the imperial palace where that beast resided, but she simply told him not to worry too much. With a small pout, she asked him not to overthink it, but he suddenly apologized for frightening her. He continued, explaining that she was a healthy adult and that there was nothing wrong with forming a deep relationship with someone. However, he confessed that no matter who she chose to bring home, he and her brothers would never be fully satisfied. He gently placed a hand on her head and reminded her to always remember that whatever choice she made, she would remain precious to them. Her eyes welled with tears, and she threw herself into his arms, confessing how grateful she was to have him as her father. The scene then shifted to the imperial palace. The emperor appeared restless and visibly frustrated in his study. His assistant quietly observed him, thinking that he seemed to be having a particularly difficult time, when the emperor suddenly called his name. He gave a single order: to retrieve the Tears of Asteria. The Tears of Asteria was the most expensive diamond ring ever sold on the black market. It was also the very ring the emperor had once declared he would use when he found the love of his life. The assistant's initial excitement quickly turned to horror when the emperor issued a second command: to make the cherry blossoms bloom again, no matter the cost. He hurriedly explained that cherry blossom season had ended the previous month, and they would have to wait until the following year for them to bloom again. However, the emperor only responded dryly, stating that his assistant was speaking far too much that day. Make it happen no matter what. See you guys in my next video. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments and leave ideas for the next recap. As much as I want to update faster and create longer videos, it is currently examination season, which has caused the delay. I truly hope you enjoyed this video, and I am sorry for not being able to upload as often as I would like.